Now, for those of you who are about to dislike this video and write an angry comment, hear me out. Xenoblade X is a great game, and it deserves a spot on the Nintendo Switch library. But even the most die-hard of fans have got to admit, the game's got a couple of flaws. And if the game gets ported over, those flaws are coming with it. And that's why I'm proposing that a remaster or remake of the game will be the ideal way to play Xenoblade X. In this video, I'm going to highlight some of the issues that I've just mentioned, and ways that I would go about fixing them in a remake of the game. But first, let's just clarify what the differences are between a port, a remaster, and a remake. This is what a port is like.
A great success!
To clarify, anything that's in the game currently would be brought over to the Nintendo Switch version, with very little to no balance fixes or bug fixes included within. So all of the issues the game currently has will be taken over. A remake, on the other hand, for the most part, is the complete opposite. Although some of the old code and assets from the Wii U version might be reused, for the most part, things will be remade from scratch, allowing for the devs to program out some of the bugs and issues that exist in the current version. And a remaster is somewhere in the middle. A lot of the content will be stripped directly from the Wii U version, however, there'll be lots of updates where necessary, in such places such as textures, fixing bugs, optimizing the game for the console, and much, much more. And now it's time to talk about those issues that I mentioned before, and we're going to start off with one that anyone who has actually played Xenoblade X will have likely encountered, which is all of the graphical glitches and issues, as well as the loading of the game. This issue shows its ugly face absolutely everywhere. Fast travel to a new location and the ground texture won't be loaded properly. Start a new cutscene and all the models will look all funny. Heck, even loading into the game for the first time tends to have all of the textures stretched out as the game tries to load everything at once. And all of these might sound not so bad on the surface, but when you can get stuck inside of buildings because they hadn't loaded in time, then I think it's an issue that needs to be resolved. I mean, imagine a new player starting the game for the very first time, and then this is one of the very first things that they see. Those are supposed to be trees. They're freaking 2D! And of course all of these graphical issues fix themselves eventually, but they take an embarrassingly long time for them to do so. And you can be staring at a lot of these graphical issues for a good 30 seconds sometimes before the game finally catches up. Fortunately, however, it's not going to be very difficult for the devs to fix a lot of these issues. The Switch is naturally a more powerful console, and it should therefore cope with running the game and loading the areas a lot more efficiently than the Wii U ever could. However, graphically, the Switch isn't all that more powerful than the Wii U, and arguably, the Wii U has the better GPU out of the two consoles, and therefore it could be necessary for other things to be put in place to counteract this issue. I suggest things such as optimizing the game engine and loading of the world to iron out the majority of the graphical issues, and if it was necessary, potentially lower the render distance slightly to allow the immediate area to load in quicker. I wouldn't worry though about updated textures slowing the game down again, as this game was made 7 years ago, and the textures were likely developed even longer ago than that. And there are many new ways to optimize and streamline textures in this day and age. Next, I want to talk about the endgame for Xenoblade Chronicles X, and how poorly it is structured. A well-structured endgame has got a clear and concise order that you should follow to get the most out of your endgame grinding, such as gathering loot or items, which increase your odds of getting better gear and weapons. But Xenoblade Chronicles X doesn't really work like that. Say that you wanted to acquire this weapon, which is arguably the best longsword in the game. It's dropped by this guy, a level 88 tyrant, and so this means you're likely going to want to grind for some better weapons before going for this one. The best way to do that is by defeating this enemy, which is another level 70 tyrant. Fortunately, you can fight this one with a Skell. So as long as your Skell's built properly, which is extra grinding on top of everything I'm about to mention, then you're golden. You'll shortly realise, however, that the drop rate for weapons is rather low, so you're going to want to get some treasure sensor augments before you continue to fight him. However, to craft those, they require an item from another level 91 tyrant, so you're going to have to enhance your Skell even more just so that you can beat that enemy, which will likely mean grinding for different items just so you can beat him once. And this is all so that you can get one weapon. Realistically, the logical solution is to make treasure sensor cheaper, and the best way to do that would be to remove the need for decrepit wings to craft the treasure sensor augments. From there you can easily grind for either your ground gear or your Skell gear, which you can then use to beat the remaining enemies and grind whatever item you want at that point, which should make the endgame a lot more enjoyable and a lot less frustrating. And speaking of frustrating, we have the next issue with the game, and that's how trait RNG works. If you thought that previous point was bad, imagine going through all that work to find out that the piece of gear that you want comes down to complete RNG. That is the trait system. Each piece of gear in the game can have up to a random selection of 3 traits, and in the current game, these traits are set in stone. The traits it has when it drops are the traits it's going to forever have. I'll use the previously mentioned longsword as an example. It has 16 different possible traits, and considering that it can randomly drop with 1, 2 or 3 of the traits, the chances of this weapon dropping with the exact 3 traits that you want is ridiculously low. So low that I don't know it off the top of my head, but the figure will be on screen now. And this is a weapon that's guaranteed to drop via this one enemy. Any other weapon in the game is random to drop in the first place, so the chances of one of those coming through is even lower. The solution therefore should be obvious. We simply need the ability in game to be able to change or re-roll existing traits on gear, and I'd also like the ability to upgrade lower rarity gear to a higher tier, which would, for the most part in my opinion, completely remove the frustration from this process, and would make grinding for gear an actual enjoyable experience. Right then, that's enough talk about endgame weapons. Another reason they should remake and remaster the games is to add in the missing and previously planned content which was supposed to be in the original game. And this is something Monolith Soft would likely want to do anyway, considering they did it for Future Connected with Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. There's evidence to suggest, for example, that Celica should have had another affinity mission, which featured you facing off against 2 enemies called Neo-Nails who have the ability to accelerate time. And this would have made for a really interesting and exciting mission to play through. Another example is that the Rothian characters Gajiag and Gabuil seem to have been planned to have been playable at one stage of Xenoblade Chronicles X's development. Almost every weapon class in the game has 3 characters that wield that said weapon, except for Sniper and Photon Saber, and Javelin if you consider Lao, which are weapons that these characters have been shown to be wielding. These missing pieces of content could be added into a remake of the game, or could be added at a later date as DLC, which could include lots of new content for the players who have been playing this game since 2015. And it's likely if we did get DLC for this game that we could see new things such as new armour and cosmetics, new skells, and so on. And the final point I want to discuss in this video is fashion gear for weapons. Although not as important as some of the other points I've raised in this video, it's still going to be a necessary thing to come with a remaster or remake of the game, as it's really annoying to have selected all of the nice outfits and cosmetics for all the characters at the end of the game and not be able to put in the matching weapons. I mean, look at how many of these weapons are miscoloured, but lower rarity ones would match beautifully. And this may seem like a silly final point, but I think it's going to be important for this game to have many quality of life updates like this, so that the game continues to be enjoyable and doesn't repeat its previous performance on the Wii U. And it's the little changes like these that the Nintendo Switch version of Xenoblade Chronicles X deserves. And those are the reasons that I don't want Xenoblade Chronicles X to be ported to the Nintendo Switch, and instead it should be remade or remastered. But I hope you've all enjoyed this video. Leave a comment down below letting me know your preference of a port compared to a remaster and remake, and let me know what sort of changes you'd like to see in a Switch version of this game. But if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my future Xenoblade videos. And until next time guys, peace.